What's going on, Empire Builders? We have Micheal Roderic in the house today for episode number 52. What's going on, Micheal? How are you doing today?
How's it going? Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for spending some of your time with me today. So, Micheal is the founder of Small Pond Enterprises and the Access to Anyone podcast. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Very cool. Well, in your own words, so I don't butcher this or do it any disservice, why don't you tell us a little bit about your businesses and what you got going on?
Sure. So basically, I run a business helping thoughtful givers become thought leaders. And I do this by using a lot of the methodologies that I learned from going from being a high school English teacher to a Broadway producer in under 2 years. So I started to look at what is the intersection between relationship building and thought leadership. And I started to help entrepreneurs really figure that out. So people who love to give, they love to support other people, but don't necessarily take the time to sit down and say, well, what do I want to put out into the world? What do I want to create? Those are the folks that I help really just kind of blow it out of the water and just like take those ideas, put them in a much, much bigger context, ask for big things, get the things that they want, and really, really push against all of the issues that come up whenever we think about asking, all the psychology, all the challenges that come from there.
Very cool. And yeah, when we first met, what you did really resonated with me because I've always felt like I give too much in some cases when I'm trying to make connections with people. And I'm always afraid to go for the ask. And it's so funny, these people that I've had relationships with forever, I see them doing other joint venture promotions or things like that. And I'm like, I could ask them. I just don't. So I'd really love to, we'll get into that, your take on this. But what I'd really love for everyone watching today and to really get into is, one, why you think relationships are so important and really how they can grow your business. And then two, how you go about not only creating them, but actually leveraging them to get results.
Sure. So in essence, pretty much everything that you need in life comes down to two things: platforms and people. So you either are going to need platforms, places to put your information out there, or you're going to need people who are going to introduce you to opportunities, to the types of things that you need. And you're always going to find that there's going to be somebody who, if it takes you 4 steps to do something, it takes them 2, or it takes them 1. So the more that you're able to develop relationships with people who can skip those steps, the faster you actually get to move. So if you take the time to really sit down and engage and build good relationships, what you're able to do is then you're able to say, okay, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. Who in my circle, who do I know who might be able to help me with that and probably do it faster than I could, or probably just have a much better relationship than I have. So I see it as the importance of building relationships is the fact that it enriches your life. First of all, like you are going to feel better if you're having conversations, if you have people around you, if you have a community. But in addition to that, once you have that community, you're able to reach things much, much faster and in a much more powerful way.
Yeah, that's really, really well said. Now, you mentioned earlier that these strategies helped you go from being an English teacher to a Broadway writer and producer. That's incredible. Tell us, what, not that maybe whole process looked like, but how you were able to use relationships to do something like that.
Sure. So the most important part about good relationship building is understanding what other people value. And most of the time we make assumptions about what other people value and what we think is going to be useful for them. And in Broadway, you have to raise money. So you have to sit down with somebody and you have to get them to be willing to write a $50,000, $100,000, sometimes $250,000 check. And in many cases, they are going to lose their money because only a very, very small number of Broadway shows actually hit. Most shows lose money or they break even at best. There are very, very few successes. So what I did was I took the time to understand why were people doing this outside of the money because that wasn't going to be the motivator. So I had to look at, if somebody wanted to invest in a show, why were they doing it? And what I found was that there were people who their lives were relatively boring for them because they were doing something maybe that they knew they always, were going to do. Maybe they grew up in a family business or whatever the scenario was, but they looked for something exciting to be a part of. So I could go to those people who had already been making plenty of money and say, this is an opportunity for you to be a part of something interesting, to be a part of something different. And then for others, it was about status. So for some people, it was about, do you want to be at an opening night party with Green Day? And for certain people, that's really attractive. And for others, it's not. But it's taking the time to understand what it is those people want, what it is those people are looking for. And then the last piece I'll touch on specifically on the Broadway producing side is that most Broadway producers are interested in credit. They're interested in having their name above the title or on a project. So what I did when I first got started was I went to producers and I said, I just want to get better at raising money. I don't actually care about credit. So I got way more deal flow and more people asking me to raise money because I wasn't trying to put my name on the show as most of my colleagues were. So by the time I was able to prove that I was able to raise that money, people started coming and offering me credit. So the process was much, much shorter than the folks who are always kind of pushing and trying to get theirs as quickly as they can.
That's such a great story, man. I love that you were able to still get credit even though you weren't asking for it. You earned it, rather than just asking for it, which is far, far better. So, and I also really like you were talking about taking the time to understand what different people want. I feel like in the marketing world specifically, and just business in general, we're very cynical. But you're talking more now leaning towards in the arts world. But I don't think it matters. Everyone's got these different needs. And I always feel like for me, I'm like, how can I help make this person more money? But to them, and especially the people you're serving or you're talking about, they already have money. They don't need more money. They want, like you said, something to fulfill them or something to make sure they're not bored all day long. So it's really, I love that, man, because I feel like most of us default, especially myself, to, hey, this person just wants to earn money and that's all they care about. But there's so much more that we can do for them as individuals and not just earn that money.
Yeah, what I like to say is that every single person that you meet, no matter who they are and what they're doing, has a TCM index. And that's an index of time, connections, and money. And for every single person, there's a deficit in one of those three things. And it's a big, big pain point for them. So if you make an assumption about what the deficit is, a lot of the time when you try to make the offer or you're trying to help or you're marketing to them, whatever the scenario is, if you assume what it is, a lot of the time they're not going to be interested in the offer. So if money is their pain point, then you talking about ways that they're going to save time doesn't matter. If money is their pain point, you talking about who they're going to meet and what kind of connections they're going to make, it does not matter because money is their pain point. But if money is not the pain point and somebody is really more concerned about who are they going to be around, or they're more concerned about how long is this going to take, then you can very, very easily start to, dig in deeper and you can find better ways to market to those people because you're not trying to sell them on, oh, it'll be cheaper, or, oh, it'll, I can save you this, or I can, we can do it this way. So I think it's so important to take the time to figure out where that deficit is for people and make sure that whatever you're offering or whatever you're putting out there is in line with what they actually need, as opposed to assuming what they need, which I think is one of the big mistakes that I see a lot of people make in building relationships.
Yeah, and in building products too. A lot of people think they have a brilliant idea, they'll go build it, realize no one wants to buy it, and get really disappointed. So it's all about needing to pre-sell it, and with relationships, pre-vet and pre-understand before you try and go after these people.
Exactly.
Very cool, man. So tell me a little bit about now the process of how you identify these people, because I think and would assume most people would be a little bit nervous stepping into that world. I mean, it seems like it's very exclusive, a lot of type A personalities. How did you identify these people and then kind of inject yourself into their world?
So I was always in the theater world and different capacities. So I had been a writer, I had been a director, and I was producing on sort of the smaller level, right? So I was producing at the 99 seat and under kind of side of things. But ultimately, there's lots of places where these people go for education, right? And I think that if you're trying to meet the upper echelon of any industry, you want to look at what is the education system of that industry. So in Broadway, it's this thing called CTI, which is the Commercial Theater Institute. And basically, this is an institute that teaches people how to become Broadway producers. It was originally started with this guy, Fred Vogel, who had a bunch of friends who had a lot of money, but had no idea how Broadway worked. So what he did was he taught them, and then it turned into a course, and it's now a 3-day conference that happens, a 14-week event. So what I did was I looked at, okay, these are the education places where these people are going to be presenting, going to be putting their information out there. So I said, let me go and let me see what the education is, and let me get a better sense of who the players are. And
Right.
once I had that understanding, I was able to say, okay, these are the players that I resonate with. These are the people that I like versus, and I think that's the most important thing. You can't go from the angle of like, this is the most important person, so I'm going to engage with them. You have to go from the angle of, do I believe in what this person is doing? Because people will smell it a mile off if you go up and you compliment them and you say that they're so great and you don't believe in what they're doing and
Right.
you're not that interested in their stuff. So I found producers who were producing things that I agreed with, that I thought were really powerful and really effective. And I said, I want to help you become more successful. Like that was my entire angle. Like I interned for a Broadway producer when I first got started, and I licked envelopes. I did a bunch of the things that you do to start to build that relationship, because there were tons of people who, at my age, I was teaching high school full time. I was probably one of the oldest interns because I was in my 20s. But I didn't even care, because I was going to do whatever I needed to do to basically build that relationship and make that relationship happen.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool, man. And I like that it's happening offline too. My community, a lot of digital marketers, people who spend their time behind their laptops all day. I think it's easy to forget there's a real world out there. People actually meet in person, and that's where you can create some of your best opportunities and relationships, is actually face to face.
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of these things where the way that we engage with somebody in person versus the way that we engage with them online is so different. Because if we're online, there's that distance, there's that disconnect. In many cases, if we're talking about social media, there's a lot of polish that happens. And when you're just out at something and you're hanging out and you're doing some kind of activity that has nothing to do with work, you bond with people in a much more significant way. You
Yeah.
feel closer to them. You open up. You talk about pretty much everything other than work, and that's where all the deals get done. It's the classic scenario of no deals get done in the boardroom. They get done on the yacht. They get done at the company picnic. They get done at these places where people have that guard down and they're just hanging out and meeting each other as people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So what would your advice be then to someone who maybe is a little bit intimidated by that face-to-face meeting people? How can they get past that discomfort? And then how can they be memorable too? Like going to these big events, sometimes it's super easy to meet 100 people and then forget what the hell just happened in a blind, rush of the weekend or whatever happened. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love how you can get past that, uncertainty, and then how you can stand out and be memorable.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of getting past the uncertainty, I'll use a metaphor that I use all the time, which is that these large events are like the ocean. And basically, you have different archetypes within that ocean. And the first archetype are the sharks. So these are the people who they're running around. They're trying to give everybody their business card. They're dominating conversations. It's all about them. Their like ego, doesn't fit the room. All those different types of things. The second group are your dolphins. And these are the people who come to the event to cluster with people that they already know. They don't really want to meet anybody else, so they just kind of stay in clusters and talk to each other, and just like a school of dolphins, they just kind of stay together. Your third group are those who are drowning. And those are the people who are standing outside of that circle of dolphins trying to get in on that like cluster of people, feeling kind of awkward, right? The people who are standing in the corner, people who are standing by the bar, people who are like looking at their phone because they feel awkward and kind of miserable. And then the last group, and this ties to this idea of sort of how do you make it more comfortable for yourself, are the lifeguards. And the lifeguards look around the room for people who are drowning, for people who are being attacked by sharks, for people who don't feel comfortable. And they go up and they say hello. They go up and they talk to those people. So what I often tell anybody who is going into a large-scale event, rather than trying to put yourself in this place of I need to sell myself to people and I need to bust into these groups of I need to bust into these groups of dolphins or take on these sharks, be a lifeguard. Because the second that you put yourself in that place of I'm here to help people and I'm going to look around and try to meet people that I can help, you completely change the way that you feel. You're no longer trying to sell. You're no longer trying to present. And then if you want to be the person who's memorable, take the time to ask somebody about something other than the professional. Most people will spend the entire time just talking about professional things. But there's also what inspires this person? Why are they doing what they do? There's also what are they aspiring to? What are their next levels? What are their next steps? What types of things are they excited by? Why are they even at this event? All these different types of things. If you're the person who engages somebody in a conversation that gets them to say, wow, that was a great conversation, you're much more likely to be remembered than the person who came up to you, gave you their pitch, asked you for your pitch, said, yes, nice to meet you, handed you a business card, and walked away.
Yeah.
You want to hang out with people who you feel like they get you and you feel like they understand you. And if you want to be memorable, listen to people. Like, actually pay attention to what they're saying. Don't worry about your pitch. Don't worry about your presentation at all. Just get to know and get to understand the person. And they'll remember you for the fact that you took the time to get to understand them, get to know them, as opposed to everybody else who was sort of coming up to them and trying to sell them or trying to do like a two-way pitch scenario.
Yeah, exactly. And I talk a lot about this as it relates to sales, because I think a lot of us, we get afraid of sales and we lose sales because we enter pitch mode and we just try and convince someone to buy what we have instead of getting an understanding of where they are, where they want to be. Do we realistically have a solution that can help them get there? And I love that you're applying that same concept to networking events. It's the same thing. If you go in with a mindset of you need to pitch, you're going to be scared because it's probably not going to work very well and you're going to get frustrated. So if you go in with that, I want to build a relationship and help people, that's going to be a lot better.
Yeah.
And I'll also, inject something here too. What I'll say is, it might be obvious, but with anything, don't just do it once. Keep doing it.
Yeah.
I went to traffic and conversion last year, and I barely knew anyone. I made like a couple of connections. I shook a few hands, and I was the person who was drowning. But I made a few connections, and then over the next year, built those up online. This last year, I went back to TNC. It felt like I knew everyone. I mean, I was introducing people. Like I was the one saving people who were drowning because they didn't know anyone. So, I wouldn't give up right away, because you can plant those seeds, nurture the relationships, and then you're a super connector.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. I think that too many people give up after they've had a bad experience with an event. And the fact of the matter is, you're going to go to bad events. Like, you have to just accept the fact that you're going to have events that don't really work. And you're also going to have social situations that are painful. You're going to have instances where people are, they're talking to you and they literally turn their back on you and go and say hi to somebody else and leave you stuck in the middle, of the room. You're going to have instances where people like look at you point blank after you've really clearly articulated what it is that you do and say, I don't understand what it is that you do. Like, you're going to have these moments. And if you let those moments crush you, then you're going to lose out on all those other opportunities, because you'll be like, oh, well, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go through that again. But the more that you learn from those experiences, the better you are every single time you return.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%, man. So this is really, really great content so far. We've talked about how you can kind of identify and approach and, get into their world. So now let's, move over to leveraging these relationships. Let's first talk, though, about what that balance between giving and asking is. Because like I said, I'm always afraid to ask. I've gotten better at it. But where's that line, and how do you know when it's a good time to possibly ask for someone's favor or whatever that might be?
So I think it's one of the things where we have there's been a lot of very bad education around the idea of reciprocity. So we've been presented with the concept that if I give to you, you're going to have a very, very strong desire to give back to me, and that is going to happen within the time of our interaction. And the fact of the matter is, everybody has a reciprocity impulse and everybody has a reciprocity timeline. So if you have a strong reciprocity impulse, if you're that type of person, what tends to happen is if somebody gives to you, you're going to feel like you need to give back almost right away, because that's just who you are. But then there are other people, they don't have very strong reciprocity impulses, so they're not going to give back right away. That's not sort of where their brain is. The other side is that people have reciprocity timelines. So for some people, they will never give in the moment, even if they feel like there is something that they can give, because their timeline is different. So they make the decision of, they vet you. They decide whether or not they want to make an introduction for you, or they decide whether or not they want to make a referral for you, and they watch what you do, and they vet it, they figure it out. And I saw this specifically with financial advisement, right? The richest people that I knew would never take on the financial advisor who pitched them. What they would do is they would recommend that advisor to 2 or 3 people who were significantly below them, and then they'd watch. And they'd see, did this person actually increase their net worth? And if they did that for their friends and for their, for people that they knew, then they said, okay, yeah, maybe I'll work with them. So there are tons of people out there who are vetting and sort of trying to figure it out. So the thing is, if you have a strong reciprocity impulse, you're going to want to give back right away. If you don't, you're not. So you can't put yourself in this place where you believe, oh, if I give, this person's going to give back to me.
Right.
Or if I ask, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get this return kind of immediately. So going to your point about being afraid of asking or being worried about asking, what happens is that when we give, there is a chemical reaction that we receive as a result of that giving. So we get a shot. Some say it's oxytocin, some say it's dopamine. Whatever the chemical is, there's a chemical that's released in our body when we give. There is no chemical released when we ask. So we don't get any sort of actual physiological reward for asking. So as a result, what happens is we get hooked on giving. I call it the giver's fix, where basically we're just giving and giving and giving and helping and helping and helping, and we're feeling so good that we don't want to ask, because then we feel bad because we feel like we're taking away from somebody. But here's the most interesting thing about that. If we don't let the people in our lives know what it is that we need, if we don't ask, we're robbing them of that good feeling. We're actually not giving them the opportunity to receive that oxytocin, to feel good, to feel like useful in regards to helping and supporting us. So by doing all of that giving and never asking, we're actually being more selfish, because we're hogging all of that good feeling for ourselves. So when you start to think about it that way, you start to say, like, well, wait a second, I've done these things for all of these people, and I've helped all of these people, but none of them really know what it is that I need or what it is that I'm looking for. Why don't I just educate them? And the important thing about asking, especially after you've given, is to not expect anything specific from the ask. I think the mistake that a lot of people make is that they think, oh, well, I did this, I did all this stuff for Brian. So Brian's going to, when I go to Brian and I ask him for this big thing, he's going to say yes. And then if you say no, it's like, oh man, what the hell, and all this stuff. But the thing is, if you do that, if you operate in that way, you're not giving a gift, you're making a transaction. You're just not letting the person know that it's a transaction. You're not letting them know that this is a trade, and you're posing as a gift. If you give, whatever comes back when you ask is whatever you get. You cannot expect somebody to do something based off of something else that you've done, because that's just not how these things work.
Yeah, really, really good, man. Giving with no expectation, but still doing it strategically, so you're not, like you said, just giving and never asking for anything in return.
Yeah.
So I probably have my own answer and version of this, but where do you see, especially in the business world, these types of relationships being a real benefit to an entrepreneur? Say, you're just getting started and you really want to earn more money. Where do you see, these types of relationships helping those people?
Sure. So one aspect is that if you start to build relationships with people who are doing things that are slightly ahead of you, you can avoid a lot of mistakes, because those people will often give you advice, they'll give you thoughts, they'll give you suggestions, and in many cases, those are suggestions that they are giving their clients and that they're getting paid a lot of money for. But if you develop a relationship, there's plenty of times where somebody's like, you know what, I'm going to tell you this thing that, made somebody else $50,000 that I charged as part of my $10,000 coaching package. But you know what, I like you, so I'm going to help you out. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that if you're an entrepreneur and you develop relationships with people who are slightly ahead of you, and if you also are mentoring people who are slightly below you, there's going to be a lot of opportunities, a lot of things that come as a result of that. But then the other piece is that when you have relationships and people remember you, you're top of mind. So you start to be introduced to other individuals, in some cases completely outside of your circle, in some cases at significantly higher levels, who are then like, oh, I want to help, I want to help you, or I think what you're doing is interesting. And you would never have that introduction, you never have that connection to that opportunity had you not taken the time to build those relationships so that people are talking about you. Because when people are talking about you, that's what causes things like press. That's what causes introductions to happen. You want to basically become, my friend Sebastian Marshall said this a number of years back, and I love this idea. You want to become the type of person that other people are proud to introduce their friends to, because the value that you have in being part of that person's world is so, so high. That's what you want to aspire to. You want to aspire to the point where when somebody says, how do I help this friend have the best experience ever, I'm going to introduce them to this person. That's what you want to aspire to. That's what you want to push towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add a little bit to that too. And just because this had come up in my group the other day, and where people were, sharing who they serve and what they do, and a lot of them weren't really, really specific. They either said who they serve or what they do. And I was challenging them to be really specific, because when you're specific and you build these relationships, people know who to actually refer you to. If they don't know what you do, or you just say, I do marketing for small business, it's like, that doesn't help me. It's like, tell me you need to know exactly who you are and how you can help other people so you can be referred.
Yeah. And I often like to say that ambiguity is kryptonite to a connector. When somebody says to me, oh, I'm looking for anybody who needs XYZ, I always tell them I don't know anybody's. I only know somebody's.
Yeah.
So you have to give me a super, super specific idea of what you're really going to do for this person and what industry they're in, because my brain works in keywords.
Yeah.
And if you give me a general query, I'm probably not going to find you a very good result.
Yeah, and I even have a story about this. Down at TNC, I had met someone who she told me, oh, I do marketing for small to medium-sized businesses, and like that just didn't help me. And she wanted me to introduce her to someone, and I ultimately did, just because I was being polite. I knew that person, but it was really hard for me to be like, so she does marketing, I guess, and like there's no like, he can't make that connection. He's meeting so many people. It's like, okay, great, thanks. But so anyways, we won't dive too far down that rabbit hole. Listen, your advice today has been so helpful. I love the analogy too of sharks, dolphins, lifeguards, and people drowning. That's something that's going to really stick with me and help me out a lot. So where can people go watching to learn a little bit more about you?
So my website's smallpondenterprises.com. And if they go on there, they can basically find, I have a hand your heroes, break some of these ways that you think about asking and reaching out to folks. And then they sign up for, I have a daily that I send where basically I just kind of riff on different ideas about relationship building, messaging, all those different types of things. And I'm all over the socials. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, all that stuff. And the podcast, of course, access to anyone, podcast.com.
Very cool. I will make sure to link all those places up below so you guys can get access to all of his great content. And again, man, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Brian. I really appreciate it as well.
Great, man. Talk soon.
Yeah, you as well.